Hello folks. I'd like to take a few minutes to go over what I think is a classic standard set-piece type battle in Shogun Total War II multiplayer. My army is on the right with the green banners, and my opponent is Torodas, who has the blue banners on the left. My army is built around a simple core and simple premise. Its front line is composed of 4 units of katana samurai, and their basic goal is to walk over and murder the enemy's front line. Katana samurai are vulnerable to cavalry charges, and certain high-tier melee units can beat them one-on-one, but on a Koku-for-Koku basis there is no more efficient melee troop than katana samurai. The reason my main line consists of only 4 units is visible immediately behind that line. Katana heroes are obscenely expensive for very few men, but their stats are incredible. They're tanks, they kill anything they touch in melee, and they're almost completely unbreakable. My flanks are each anchored by a unit of Yari samurai, as I've learned from painful experience that katana samurai cannot handle cavalry, especially when they come in for flanks for hammer and anvil strikes. I used to use Ashgaru Yari for this, but Ashgaru simply can't stand up against a disproportionate amount of cavalry, which some players bring. You need samurai level morale to deal with that. My first real unit of reserves is a Warrior Monk Naginata unit. Warrior Monks are the top of the line when it comes to standard units. Warrior Monk Naginatas are much better than Katana Samurai in melee, but they do cost more and they don't synergize with the same retainers that buff Katana Samurai. The reason I'm using one unit of Warrior Monks is that they have a special ability called Warcry, which is a small area of effect debuff that noticeably reduces enemy units' defense values. The theory is that I commit my monks against a concentration of enemy forces and then use Warcry to debuff them so that my katanas can kill them just as efficiently. It doesn't hurt that the Naginatas of the monks also do have a small bonus against cavalry. The main weakness of monks is the fact that they carry very light armor, which makes them vulnerable to archers. My last unit of reserves is a Warrior Monk Matchlock unit. Matchlocks have 2 basic purposes in this game. One is to kill heavily armored units, and the other is to inflict massive morale penalties on their target. From behind my line I can choose where to commit them, and keep them relatively well protected against cavalry by using my flanking Yari. When the time is right, I can either strike at an important target, like my enemy's general, or I can use them against a wavering line unit, hopefully causing a chain rout. The reason I'm using monks for my matchlock units is that Ashgaru will break if you so much as breathe on them, and monks are only slightly more expensive than matchlock samurai. Samurai have better armor values than monks, which makes them more useful against archers, but monks do have noticeably better reload times and accuracy than matchlock samurai. Finally, we come to my general, who is the core of this army. The key is a little support ability called Stand and Fight. What this does is it gives a substantial melee bonus to every single one of my units within the general's area of effect, which is also expanded. It would easily cover the entire army visible on this screen, and then some. What this basically means is my entire plan is to run up to the enemy, trigger Stand and Fight, and win. Though Stand and Fight dismounts the general, makes him immobile, and makes him unable to use any of his other abilities unless you deactivate it, it also seems to make him highly resilient. Generals in this game are often capable of falling as one of the first casualties in their bodyguard unit, but in Stand and Fight I have never seen the general die unless he's the last man standing. Very powerful ability, extremely good, and my entire army is built around it. Last, but surprisingly not least, we come to my 2 units of light cavalry in the far back. This is my only independent maneuver element. The light cavalry are a light-hitting force that really has no substantial melee presence, yet they remain an essential part of this army. They're my only way of disrupting enemy ranged units, and despite my army's effectiveness in melee, ranged units with a good screen can actually do enough damage to basically take me apart. The light cavalry are there to prevent this, as well as to prevent cavalry from completely outmaneuvering my Yaris and destroying my main line. Despite their cheap cost, the light cav is always a disproportionately important part of my force. They're actually already at 2/3 strength due to a stupid mistake during scouting and skirmishing against enemy cavalry. Terodos' army is more well-rounded than mine. It's led by 2 units of samurai bowmen. These are accurate, deadly against lightly armored units, and they will die horribly in melee to anything with more fighting power than Ashgaru Yari. The core of Terodos' main line are 2 units of katana samurai. He's actually using retainers that boost their combat effectiveness and decrease my own, which makes them superior one-on-one to my own katana samurai. Terodos' reserve is a single unit of what I think is the most interesting unit that I've never been able to make work, Nodachi samurai. These are extremely powerful on the charge, but otherwise they're generally lackluster. They have poor armor, and they significantly underperform katana samurai in prolonged melee. Theoretically, they're best used exactly as Terodos is using them now, as a reserve that can get the most out of their charge bonus in a decisive situation. Still, the fact that they're foot troops makes them hard to get into position at the right timing, so they may just be a very skill-intensive unit. Terodos' flanks are amply secured by various units of polearms. The Yari Ashgaru are basically chaff, probably purchased with leftover cash in army construction, but Naginata Samurai are, I think, the best infantry unit in the game. Though they narrowly lose to Katana Samurai in an even fight, they are much, much more versatile. Not only does their armor protect them against projectiles, but their Naginata have a bonus versus cavalry, albeit not as much as a Yari, which also removes Katana Samurai's traditional weakness versus cavalry. What they lack in raw power, they massively make up for in versatility, and they cost exactly the same as Katana Samurai. They make excellent screening forces for an archer-based army, because they will take very little damage from friendly arrow fire, and they will last long enough to allow the archers to whittle down the enemy army substantially, perhaps even enough to allow the Naginata to win the melee fight. My only reservation with their use in Terodos' army is that he's using a lot of them, and they don't synergize with his retainer selection very well. As I mentioned, he has a number of buffs to sword infantry, and Naginatas don't get those same buffs. Terodos' general has points in all 3 major trees, but primarily is an archery general. I imagine this goes along with a basic strategy of using Naginata and katanas to screen, and whittling down the enemy army with archery and cavalry support. Speaking of cavalry, Terodos has a substantial investment in Yari cavalry, 3 units to be precise, positioned far out at the flanks. Yari cavalry are extremely deadly against other cavalry, and they have a major charge bonus. This makes them very good at both hammer and anvil strikes and at countering large concentrations of enemy cavalry. This means that Terodos has a much more potent mobile maneuver element, and has positioned it to hammer and anvil my line as I advance. This makes for an interesting tactical situation, since my entire plan is simply to advance straight ahead and bull through Terodos' line. This means we're going strength versus strength here, and neither of our army compositions simply defeats the other outright. I pause prior to entering archery range to allow both me and my troops to catch their breath. This prompts Terodos to move his archers forward into range. This actually provides an opening to push my cavalry forward, which in turn will provide cover to push my entire line forward when his archers are forced to retreat. I wish I could say that I planned that, but it just kind of turned out this way. Still, this is one of those ways in which light cavalry can be much more useful than their stats appear. This allows my main army to cover a large portion of ground without being showered with arrows. My light cavalry is still threatening Terodos' left flank, so he sends his Yari cavalry after my light cav. That's a completely uneven matchup, and he's going to actually catch and destroy one of my units of light cav. Also note the icons that just appeared over all of the units. That's Whistling Arrows, a debuff to melee attack.
Our general is in grave danger!
What that basically means is that the melee is going to take a little bit longer to resolve, which gives Terodos' archers a little bit more time to work. Now, the reserves on both sides are mostly committed. My warrior monks are doing a huge amount of damage on my right flank, and my katana samurai are holding the center, while my general has dismounted for stand and fight. My light cav is also hitting his general in the rear, and the only reserves he has to bring in are his own Yari cavalry. But his Yari cavalry on his right flank are also hitting my lines right about now. Unfortunately for Terodos, he actually plows directly into the horses behind my general, which breaks the momentum of his charge. Furthermore, his Naginata rout just before his cavalry can plow into the rear of my warrior monks.
Our men are running from the battlefield! Shameful display!
And though he's cleaned up my light cavalry and is now charging my matchlocks, which had moved into position to shoot his general, they do not have the ability to fight off the Yari samurai that I've moved up behind the matchlocks. So it's time for Terodos to try a new strategy, and unfortunately for me, aside from my right flank, my entire front line has completely disintegrated.
Our men are running from the battlefield! Shameful display!
Luckily for me, I do have that right flank, and my matchlock fire is routing his center. I don't, however, notice that one of his units of Yari cavalry has rallied, and he throws that right back into my matchlocks, which delays them while he charges my center yet again. At this point, my katana heroes are holding off his entire army of roughly 5 units plus archery support. But my matchlocks are free.
Our men are running from the battlefield! Shameful display!
That last volley killed Terodos' general, and between my reserves finally charging into the melee and my next volley of matchlock fire, that's enough to finally rout Terodos' remaining forces. All in all, a good close game.
My lord, a glorious victory will soon be yours!
I believe the outcome hinged primarily on 2 factors, one of which was the use of cavalry. Terodos' cavalry were temporarily distracted by my light cav, and more than that, his charges on my rear line didn't actually work out just right, even though I had mispositioned my Yari. Additionally, Terodos did not bring any matchlocks, and matchlocks are really the only counter to katana heroes, which allowed the heroes to anchor my front line even after the collapse of all of my other frontline forces.